Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, even more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in Kansas, in Georgia, in Missouri, in Texas, in Chicago, Illinois, in Arkansas, in California, in New York, Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, Africa, Zambia, Pakistan, Kenya, to the United Kingdom, to our brethren in Australia, and also to our brethren in Malaysia. And to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad, greetings. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. So this is our special episode number 2 on the subject, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Now, I would like to read 2SR. 2SR page 225. So 2SR page 225. It says, "Therefore the vineyard is the world, and those sent to labor in it are the church. The parable cannot refer to one literal day of 12 hours, into which God has made 5 calls for laborers in the vineyard world. For there is no record where God raised 5 church organizations in one day." It says, brothers and sisters, that 5 church organizations in one day, and had them operating all at the same time. So Matthew 20, the 5 distinct calls are 5 churches. The first call, the second call, the third call, the fourth call, and the 5th call, which is the 11th hour call, is also a church. Here in White House Recruiter, on page 33, it says, "Unparalleled, therefore, is the urgency that every 11th hour church member," so it says 11th hour church. White House Recruiter on page 33. So the 11th hour call, the 11th hour movement is the 11th hour church. And 100%, it could not be the movement of BT Hotep, because that movement is not a church, but it is just an association typifying the movement of John the Baptist. And I think it is easy to say that 11th hour church, 11th hour servants, and 11th hour message, of course, these 3 are inseparable. The 11th hour message cometh from God. Of course, it must be bestowed by God to the 11th hour church. I would like to read again the statement in 2TG 43, pages 11 and 12, saying, moreover, since the announcement of the separation of the saints from the sinners originates with the 11th hour servants, and since they are to cry aloud and say, awake, awake, put on the strength of Zion, put on the beautiful garments of Jerusalem, the holy city, for henceforth there shall no more come into thee the uncircumcised and the unclean. Isaiah 52 verse 1. And also to say, behold upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace, O Judah, keep thy solemn feast, perform thy vows, for the wicked shall no more pass through thee, he is utterly cut off. Nahum 1 verse 15. It follows that without the 11th hour message and servants, the church, Zion, would be left sleeping forever, never to behold the feet of him who brings these good tidings, of him who publishes peace, and never to put on their beautiful garments, never to be fitted for the kingdom. 2TG 43, pages 11 and page 12. Now, what are those messages delivered by the 11th hour servants? According to our reading, that is concerning Isaiah 52 verse 1 and concerning Nahum 1 verse 15. That is the message delivered by the 11th hour servants. And brothers and sisters, we read several times according to the old symbolic code. I would like to read again in 2 symbolic code, number 9, page 9. Therefore, the call in the antitype, Isaiah 52 verse 1, awake, awake, put on thy strength of Zion, put on thy beautiful garments of Jerusalem, is to the 144,000. So the message in Isaiah 52 verse 1 is addressed to the 144,000 living saints. And that is why we need to distinctly separate Isaiah 51 and Isaiah 52. I remember the statement in 1TG. It says here, in 1TG number, I think number 38, on page, hear the voice of inspiration, plainly telling brothers and sisters that Isaiah 51 and Isaiah 52 is a life and death message Let me see. Where's that page? One TG, you find it. I lost the page. Where B.T. Hotep says that is a life and death, or Isaiah 38 verse, page 23. Let us read. Isaiah 38 on verse 23. It says here, brothers and sisters, stop, think, and read over again Isaiah 51 and 52. Do not pass hastily over this life and death subject. So, 1TG number 38, page 23, it says, stop, think, and read over again Isaiah 51 and Isaiah 52. Do not pass hastily over this life and death subject. Now let us go first to Isaiah 51 on verse 9. Isaiah 51 verse 9. It says, what is the Lord's arm that judges the people? 1TG 37:14. 1TG 37:14 and 15. Concerning Isaiah 51, verse 9 and verse 10. What is the Lord's arm that judges the people? This we shall see as we read Isaiah 51, verses 9 and 10. Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake as in the ancient days, in the generations of old. Art thou not it that hath caught Rahab and wounded the dragon? Art thou not it which hath dried the sea, the waters of the great deep, that hath made the deeps of the sea a way for the ransom to pass over? How illogical it would be for God to be trying to awake himself as though he or his own arm is asleep. This verse shows that he calls the Exodus movement his arm. Rightly so, because God does his work with his servants. His servants, therefore, are his arm. And they shall judge, rule the people, and the people shall trust on them. So, that is very plain, brothers and sisters. The Lord's arm is God's movement. Exodus movement. And of course, the Exodus movement are divided into two sections. The first one is led by Moses, and the last one is led by Joshua. According to Answerer number 3, page 23. So, Isaiah 51, verse 9 and 10, in another angle of prophecy, they must be the first of the first fruits. if Isaiah 52 verse 1 is pointing to the 144,000 living saints, now, what is the message of Isaiah 52 verse 1? Because that is the message of the Lord's arm. What is the message of Nahum 1 verse 15? Being coupled together in 2TG 43 verse 11 and verse 12. The shepherd's rod admonishes us to stop, listen, think, and read. Because Isaiah 51 and Isaiah 52 is a life and death matter. Now, to repeat again, brothers and sisters, the statement is very plain. Since the announcement of the separation of the saints originates with the 11th hour servants, and their message is Isaiah 52 verse 1. Who are they? To be awakened in Isaiah 52 verse 1, 144,000. Therefore, the one who proclaimed the message is the Lord's arm. In Isaiah 51 verse 9, and the Lord's arm, it is the Lord Himself that awakened them. According to 1TG 37, it says, 1TG 37, page 16, we are glad that God Himself is arousing us and plainly telling us that as our forefathers did great things, we too, as the Lord's arm, can and shall do even greater things than they. So thank God, it is God Himself who aroused the Lord's arm, and then the Lord's arm is the instrument that God will use to awaken the 144,000 living saints in Isaiah 52 verse 1. But Nahum 1 verse 15 had been attached in that reading in 2TG 43, pages 11 and page 12. I would like to read again the statement in 2TG 24. 1TG rather. 1TG number 24. On page 18 and page 19. What is the overall purpose of Nahum's prophecy? So what is the overall purpose of Nahum's prophecy? It is to enlighten God's people of the signs of the times, to make them aware that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is at hand, that the purification of the church, the judgment in the house of God, 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 17, is soon to take place, that the wicked shall not much longer be in their midst, that the redemption of the righteous is at hand, that they must not fail to perform their God-given duties. Indeed, Nahum's prophecy clearly identifies God's people of today under the Assyrian yoke and points to their liberation. But we know, brothers and sisters, Nahum 1 verse 15 is calling God's people to keep the solemn feast. Now let us read 2TG 42, page 41. 2TG number 42, page 41. Here you see, I would like to read Nahum 1 verse 15. 2TG 42, page 41. Nahum 1 verse 15. Behold upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. O Judah, keep thy solemn feast. Perform thy vows, for the wicked shall no more pass through thee. He is utterly cut off. Inscribed in present indicative tense. He is utterly cut off. It did not say he was utterly cut off. But the voice of inspiration is very plain, saying, he is utterly cut off. Now let us read the statement in 2TG 42:41. Here you see that the announcement of this long-expected event is to be made by someone's publications. Moreover, he publishes peace and thus announces the restoration of the kingdom. This is the only peace that the world can have. There is to be no other. Those, look at the statement. Those who keep God's solemn feast and perform their vows shall have this peace, none others shall. It says, in our study today, we have summarized some of the things which will take place during the time of the end. But the most important thing, so far as you are concerned, is the decision you are now left to make. Now, brothers and sisters, since the scripture is inscribed in present tense, it must be applied to the time when the wicked is utterly cut off. It could not be pointing to the slaughtering. If we'll be saying that that message must be delivered after the slaughtering, then for what for? Brothers and sisters, are we saying that the slaughtering occurred and God's people at that time they were not yet sealed and they were commanded to keep God's solemn feast? without any doubt. Brothers and sisters, that occurrence, he is utterly cut off, pointing to the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary. And since this is the very day that all the names of the wicked will be blotted out, then Nahum 1 verse 15 must be the beginning of the proclamation of this message. He is utterly cut off. Here in tract number 4, on page 61, it says, tract number 4, page 61, reclined no longer, brother, sister, arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. Isaiah 60 verse 1. Behold upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. O Judah, keep thy soul in peace. Then it says, the truth of the sanctuary. What is the soul in peace? The truth of the sanctuary. Perform thy vows, for the wicked shall no more pass through thee. He is utterly cut off. Nahum 1 verse 15. Indicating, my dear brothers and sisters, that Nahum 1 verse 15 must be proclaimed and must be pronounced after the wicked is utterly cut off. Otherwise, such proclamation would be grammatically incorrect. For it did not say, for the wicked. He will be utterly cut off. But rather, he is utterly cut off. Inscribed in present occurrence. So, that statement is definitely applied at this present time. I would like to read 2 TG 37 on page 25. Still, Isaiah 52 verse 1 and Nahum 1 verse 15 is attached together. 2 TG 37, page 25. Here the prophetic word of God plainly declares by both Isaiah and Nahum, the prophets, that when we see these good tidings published by him, whose feet are seen upon the mountains, and this is now taking place for the first time since the prophets wrote, it is to be a sign that the wicked, the violators of the laws of Moses, are soon to be cut off from among God's people. The statement is very plain. The violators of the law of Moses are soon to be cut off from among God's people. So the solemn feast here must be the holy feast. I would like to read again on Patriarchs and Prophets, 537. There were 3 annual assemblies of all Israel for worship at the sanctuary. Exodus 23 verse 14 to 16. Shiloh was for a time the place of these gatherings, but Jerusalem afterward became the center of the nation's worship. And here the tribes convened for the solemn feast. So the spirit of prophecy called the holy feast also as solemn feast. That is the message delivered by the 11th hour servants. Keep thy solemn feast. Here in 12 symbolic code, numbers 6 and 7, page 12. Let us read. In our study, 12 symbolic code, number 6 and 7, page 12. In our study of this prophecy, we learn that this happens when the Assyrian falls. But the Lord's call to the church in Isaiah 52 to awake comes first. Who will be awakened? Isaiah 52 verse 1. The 144,000. To symbolic code, number 9, page 9. So before the fall of Assyria, the awakening call must be proclaimed first to the 144,000. Then it says, after she awakes, she is to behold something, and she is to do something. So, if you will look at the 2 verses, Isaiah 52 verse 1, it says, awake, awake. Who are they to be awakened? 144,000. Nahum 1 verse 15, it must be addressed only to the people who have been awakened, because it says, behold. How can you behold if you are still sleeping? Now let us read again. 12 symbolic code, number 6 and 7, page 12. After she awakes, she is to behold something. And she is to do something. What is she to do? She is to keep her solemn feast. She is to perform her vows. Ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. After she awakes, it says, she is to behold something, and she is to do something. I would like to read first, track number 14. On page 21. Track number 14, page 21. Applying the eye salve, Revelation 3 verse 18, they shall behold upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. Why is it that the Bible did not say, behold upon the mountains the face of him? It is not his face, but rather it is his feet that God commanded, behold the feet of him. I would like to read 2TG. Number 8 on page 20. Indeed so, for the legs of the gospel are the legs of the people who proclaim it. So what is the representation of the feet? Represents the gospel. And that is the reason that the Bible says, behold the feet of him, meaning, look only the gospel, look only the message that he proclaims. In 1TG number 2, page 20 and 21, saying, since his sheep know not faces, but know voices, then those who pay attention to faces, and who cannot differentiate between voice and voice, are sure to be misled by self-appointed shepherds. But those who give heed only to the voice of truth, are gently led in for shelter and out for green pastures. God's people are not bothered with faces, but they do give earnest heed to God-appointed voices uttering truth. What does it mean by faces? It says here in 1TG 29, page 13. It is because the laity are as a rule quick to listen to men that appeal to their taste, that because of this, the enemies of truth carefully and studiously try to pin something against the characters of those who bear the message of the hour. The adversaries will know that the laity are making their choice on the face value of men's purported reputation rather than on the weight of truth. So the significance of the divine command, behold the feet of him, you would focus your attention only to the gospel. Focus your attention to the weight of truth. Now let us go back, track number 14, page 21. Applying the eye salve, track number 14, page 21. Applying the eye salve, Revelation 3 verse 18. They shall behold upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. And beholding him, what is the statement in 12 Symbolic Code number 6 and 7, page 12? After she awakes, she is to behold something. Now this is the statement. It says, and beholding him, they shall accept his message and know the truth, and the truth shall make them free and shall save them from being spewed out of his mouth. Revelation 3 verse 16. Track number 14, page 21 and page 22. So to repeat again, the voice of inspiration is plainly telling us that after she awakes, brothers and sisters, she is to behold something. What is that she need to behold? The feet of him. What is that feet? The gospel. The message. And what is the message attached to that gospel? Keep thy solemn feast When? When God commanded His people to keep the solemn feast, after the wicked is utterly cut off. Now, let us read again the statement. "12 Symbolic Code, number 6 and 7, page 12. So let us read. In our study of this prophecy, we learned that this happens when the Assyrian falls. But the Lord's call to the church in Isaiah 52 to awake comes first. So, Isaiah 52 verse 1, to awake the church will come first. After she awakes, she is to behold something. And she is to do something. What is she to do? She is to keep her solemn feast. She is to perform her vows. From this, we understand that at the close of the Assyrian period and in the time, what church? The 11th hour church. Brothers and sisters, the 11th hour church has many illustrations. And that is why if we will only study the shepherd's rod, there is no reason for us to be being misled. Because there is a specific description of the 11th hour church. First, we already read that the 11th hour church, 11th hour movement is the shortest. According to 2SR 229. Now, if you belong to a movement by which more than 26 years, keep your eyes wide open. That is the admonition given in Answerer number 1 on page 67. And then it says, brothers and sisters, and in the time when the wicked no longer will be in the church, God's people in it are to keep their solemn feast and perform their vows. The Lord's Supper being one of the solemn feasts, you see, the Lord's Supper being one of the solemn feasts, it will be celebrated next in the time when the wicked are no more to pass through the church. "12 Symbolic Code, number 6 and 7, page 12. So, let us study for a while the Lord's Supper. Because that statement is very plain. One of the solemn feasts in Nahum 1 verse 15 is the Lord's Supper. And it says that feast brothers and sisters, must be celebrated by the 144,000 living saints, because that message is addressed to them. After the wicked is utterly cut off. Would you think that is slaughtering? Ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. That statement, utterly cut off, is pointing to the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, because we already read tract number 4, page 61. It says, the truth of the sanctuary let's read again. Tract number 4, page 61. Behold upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. O Judah, keep thy solemn feast, the truth of the sanctuary. What is the solemn feast? The truth of the sanctuary. Of course, that is pointing to the heavenly sanctuary. Now, ponder deeply. The voice of inspiration says in 2 TG 37, page 25, the violators of the law of Moses. What law? The solemn feast will be cut off. So it is illogical that these people had been slaughtered because they did not observe the holy feast, while the other people, they will observe the holy feast after they are cut off. Then that is both of them did not observe the holy feast. Very contradictory. So it's easy to understand that immediately after the cleansing of the sanctuary, in the heavenly sanctuary, the divine command by God is that those who will not keep the solemn feast, they will be destroyed. Zechariah 14, I do fully believe that that is addressed to the great multitude. The second fruits. Let us read. Zechariah 14. Zechariah chapter 14. It says, let's read. Zechariah 14 on verse 16. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. That is why that is an erroneous doctrine to say that the Holy Feast had been nailed to the cross. This is a premillennial kingdom. And then it says, and it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth, and it shall be that whose will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. And if the family of Egypt go not up, and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen, that come not up to keep the feast of tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the feast of tabernacles. So the specific feast, brothers and sisters, that the second fruits that they need to observe, they need to keep, is the Feast of Tabernacles. And those who will not keep the Feast of Tabernacles, they will be destroyed. But how about the first fruits? If the feast, which is intended to the second fruits, the great multitude, is the Feast of Tabernacles, the absolute question is that, how about the first fruits, by which in reality, Isaiah 52 verse 1 and Nahum 1 verse 15 is addressed to the first fruits, addressed to the spiritual Israel. I do fully believe that more or less 5 hours or 6 hours from now, Jesus Christ will visit this earth. And from that time, brothers and sisters, I do fully believe that there is power that all can see. For I remember that statement on Desire of Ages. $475. Desire of Ages, 475. It says, if God had made it impossible for you to see the truth, your ignorance would involve no guilt. I would like to read again, Desire of Ages 475. If God had made it impossible for you to see the truth, your ignorance would involve no guilt. But if God opened your eyes, the same with Pontius Pilate, by which he resists the drawing of the Spirit, then the time came, brothers and sisters, that the golden opportunity of Pilate passed. I would like to read Desire of Ages. 726 and 727. Let me read to you. 726 and 727. Jesus did not directly answer this question. He knew that the Holy Spirit was striving with Pilate. And he gave him opportunity to acknowledge his conviction. Sayest thou this thing of thyself? He asked. Or did others tell it thee of me? That is, was it the accusation of the priest or a desire to receive the light from Christ that prompted Pilate's question? Pilate understood Christ's meaning, but pride arose in his heart. He would not acknowledge the conviction that pressed upon him. Am I a Jew? He said. Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Then it says, Pilate's golden opportunity had passed. Yet Jesus did not leave him without further light. While he did not directly answer Pilate's question, he plainly stated his own mission. He gave Pilate to understand that he was not seeking an earthly throne. And what happened in Desire of Ages 736? It says, again he went into the judgment hall. Desire of Ages 736. Again he went into the judgment hall and said to Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. The Savior had spoken freely to Pilate, explaining his own mission as a witness to the truth. Pilate had disregarded the light. He had abused the high office of judge by yielding his principles and authority to the demands of the mob. Jesus had no further light for him. Vexed at his silence, Pilate said haughtily, Desire of Ages 736. Now, I would like to go back again to the reading in 2TG 37. TG 37 on page 25. Nahum 1 verse 15. Here the prophetic word of God plainly declares by both Isaiah and Nahum, the prophets, that when we see these good tidings published by him, whose feet are seen upon the mountains, and this is now taking place for the first time since the prophets wrote, it is to be a sign that the wicked, the violators of the laws of Moses, are soon to be cut off from among God's people. Remember Nahum 1 verse 15, that is solemn feast. And weekly Sabbath, brothers and sisters, never been called as solemn feast. The solemn feast is pointing to the yearly gatherings according to Patriarchs and Prophets 537. But when that decree will be implemented after the cleansing of the sanctuary. Why? Because when Jesus Christ will visit the earth, He will open the understanding. Both the wise virgins and the foolish virgins. The Bible is very plain in Matthew 25 that both the wise and the foolish virgins are awakened. Who awake them? Jesus Christ. Through the power of the gospel. But what is the statement? After she awakes, she is to behold something. And she is to do something. Why is it that the word behold cometh first before that statement, she is to do something? It's so because, according to track 14, page 21, to behold is to accept the message of that messenger. And what is the message of that messenger? To keep the solemn feast. The rest of the 144,000 had not been able to keep the antitypical Day of Atonement. But as far as the Bible, the spirit of prophecy is thus concerned, God winked up their ignorance. But at the time when Jesus Christ will be already in this earth, and the chances for them to behold, both to the wise and the foolish, were given. Therefore, there will be no more excuse. And that feast is none other than, brothers and sisters, the Passover feast. God demanded that all the 144,000 living saints must observe and keep that antitypical Passover feast. That is the feast mentioned according to 12 Symbolic Code, 6 and 7, page 12, that after the cleansing of the sanctuary, brothers and sisters, God commanded His people to keep the solemn feast. And that feast that follow after the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles is the Passover feast, by which the Lord's Supper is attached. Now, let me read to you. Let me read to you, page 74, in track number 8. Track number 8, page 74. It says, so shall the antitypical Passover Ezekiel 9 verse 4. Now let us read Ezekiel 9 verse 4. Ezekiel chapter 9 verse 4. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. What is Ezekiel 9 verse 4? God commanded the man with the writer inkhorn to set a mark upon the foreheads of that man that sigh and that cry. Here in track number 6, on page 73 and page 74. Let me read to you. Rather than raising your voices against the truth, rather than raising your voices against the truth, raise them in praises of it and of the Lord, for he has charged you fully to your ignorance of the truth. This is pointing to the Day of Atonement. God charged such foolishness of such ignorance of the truth. Brothers and sisters, if you return to Him at this final warning, He will gladly receive you and command His servants to clothe you with His best robe, Christ's righteousness. Isaiah 52 verse 1. What is Isaiah 52 verse 1? Christ's righteousness. Let me read to you. And track number 6, page 42. Track number 6 on page 42. It says, sigh and cry for the abominations that be done in the church. Ezekiel 9 verse 4. You know, brothers and sisters, the root cause of abominations in reality, private interpretation. I will no longer elaborate, but just to explain to you that the root cause of abominations is private interpretation. For example, why is it that the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they were eating flesh? Because of private interpretation. Why is it that the Sunday keepers, they rested on Sunday? Because of private interpretation. Why is it that all kinds of flesh, the Sunday keepers, they were eating? Because of private interpretation. Why is it that the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they were cooking during Sabbath, during Saturday? Because of private interpretation. So the root cause of abominations is private interpretations. Engaging in private interpretation. That is why the Shepherd's Rod called it the great evil. Answerer number 5, page 55. Private interpretation, the great evil. And according to Answerer number 1, page 64, Satan is determined to keep that reformation to naught, that everyone should engage to reveal in private interpretation. Now let us read track number 6, page 42. Sigh and cry for the abominations that be done in the church. Ezekiel 9 verse 4. That you may prove yourselves worthy to carry the message to her. How you may prove yourselves worthy to carry the message to her? The answer is found in Bible commentary. Brethren, not only Shepherd's Rod believers, there are many independent ministry, non-Shepherd's Rod believer. They were also vegetarian and Sabbath reformer, Reform, International, home churches, independent ministries. They were jealously sighing and crying to the mother church. Now, that is the question. Ponder deeply to yourself. In track number 6, page 42, saying, that you may prove yourselves worthy to carry the message to her. How you may prove yourselves worthy to carry the message to her? Let us read Bible commentary for BC. 4 BC 1138, 1139. 4 BC 1138. Isaiah's experience represents last day church. I do fully believe that last day church must be definitely applied to the 11th hour church, the last church in the last generation. So let us read the experience of Isaiah. It says, let me read to you, 4 BC 1139. Isaiah had denounced the sin of others. So Isaiah is crying the sins of the Jewish church. Isaiah had denounced the sin of others, but now he sees himself exposed to the same condemnation he had pronounced upon them. You see, brothers and sisters, but now he sees himself exposed to the same condemnation he had pronounced upon them. I would like to read this portion saying, Isaiah had a wonderful view of God's glory. He saw the manifestation of God's power, and after beholding His majesty, a message came to him to go and do a certain work. He felt wholly unworthy for the work. He felt wholly unworthy for the work. What made him esteem himself unworthy? Did he think himself unworthy before he had a view of God's glory? That's the question. It says, did he think himself unworthy before he had a view of God's glory? No. He imagined himself in a righteous state before God. And what is the statement? That is our experience. Me of myself, jealously crying to the Seventh-day Adventist Church since 1987. Continually sighing and crying. But the same with Isaiah. When God gave unto us graciously, given unto us such privilege. It says here in 4 BC 11:39, they are privileged to see by faith the work that is going forward in the heavenly sanctuary. 4 BC 11:39. They are privileged to see by faith the work that is going forward in the heavenly sanctuary. Now let us face the reality. Honestly. First of all, this statement in 4 BC 11:39 in reality cannot be applied to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Neither it can apply to the reformers, non-shepherds, rod believer. Because in 1 TG, number 27, I would like to read. 1 TG number 27, page 8, since this message announces that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is at hand, that the judgment for the living is about to begin, and since Isaiah the prophet was given a vision of the Lord moving into his temple for this judicial work, the prophet's experiences while he was yet in vision must therefore represent the experience of God's servants who are to announce the day of the Lord. His experience and commission must be our experience and commission. Who are they, the people mentioned here? By which their experience was illustrated by the experience of Isaiah, the people who will announce the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Is that statement can be applied to the Seventh-day Adventist Church? No. Even to the reformers, non-shepherds, rod believer. Because the statement is very plain. In the General Conference Special, page 39, it says, the judgment for the dead, furthermore, is not the message of the great and dreadful day. It does not even touch on the prophecies of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. How could they announce and proclaim the great and dreadful day of the Lord if the message of the judgment that pertains to the dead do not even touch the subject of the great and dreadful day of the Lord? Therefore, this vision of Isaiah must be applied to all the obedience who are sighing and crying, brothers and sisters, by which in reality, they were saying to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, do not be prejudiced. Listen to the message, while in reality, their character is the same with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because when we approach to them concerning the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, they were prejudiced and they will close their door. But thank God, Jesus Christ interposes. That is why the history in the days of Daniel is repeated. Jesus Christ came in rescue according to prophets and kings. I would like to read this reading. It says here, Prophets and Kings, page 572. For 3 weeks, Gabriel wrestled with the powers of darkness, seeking to counteract the influences at work on the mind of Cyrus. And before the contest closed, Christ himself came to Gabriel's aid. Prophets and Kings 572. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 120 days, Gabriel declares. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. Daniel 10 verse 13. All that heaven could do in behalf of the people of God was done. The victory was finally gained. The forces of the enemy were held in check all the days of Cyrus and all the days of his son Cambyses, who reigned about 7.5 years. That historical event will be repeated, that Jesus Christ need to come to rescue God's people. I would like to read again for BC 11:39. It says, Isaiah have denounced the sin of others, but now he sees himself exposed to the same condemnation he had pronounced upon them. He had been satisfied with a cold, lifeless ceremony in his worship of God. He had not known this until the vision was given him of the Lord, how little now appeared his wisdom and talents as he looked upon the sacredness and majesty of the sanctuary. How unworthy he was, how unfitted for sacred service. His view of himself might be expressed in the language of the Apostle Paul. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? 4 BC 11:39. Lifeless ceremony, cold, lifeless. I will tell you the truth, brothers and sisters, me of myself, you know what? When I joined the Davidian, first in Mountain Dale, how many times that we conduct DLI? Although every time that there is DLI, we receive certificate. Meaning, we passed the test. But we graduated several times because it is formality. Next year, we will have DLI again, the same theory. Everything is formality. No progress of truth at all. Now, since we are still higher to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, of course, we can say to them, you need to listen because the message is progressive. But in reality, you yourself also is not progressive. It seems progressive to the Seventh-day Adventist Church because they did not hear your message. The same situation, the message of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, although it is not progressive, it seems progressive if they will go to the Sunday keepers, because the Sunday keepers have not heard their message. The same situation, brethren. And the attitude is the same. And apology sometimes. supposed to be, we did not expect that such attitude will be found among the media. But sometimes, the Bedouin is even more prejudiced than the Seventh-day Adventists. But it's very unreasonable because the message that we proclaim is only shepherd's rod. And they were shepherd's rod believer. It is reasonable to the Seventh-day Adventist Church not to listen to the shepherd's rod believers because they don't believe the shepherd's rod. The same with the Sunday keepers, it is reasonable to them not to listen to the writings of Ellen G. White because they don't believe Ellen G. White. But it is unreasonable for a Seventh-day Adventist, claiming Seventh-day Adventist, and you are not believing the writings of Sister White saying, flesh should be abandoned. There is no cooking during Sabbath. You need to accept that because you are Seventh-day Adventist. You believe the writings of Sister White. The same situation with the Davidian. Supposed to be, since we are a shepherd's rod believer, we love the shepherd's rod. We love to listen the message that cometh from the shepherd's rod publications. But, as I've said, sometimes it is the Davidian who are so prejudiced and hoping, brethren, while God gave us still a chance, but those who will not observe this antitypical Passover among the media, all of them will perish. All of them will be destroyed. According to the Bible, according to the shepherd's rod. That is very plain in 2 TG 37:25. Now, I would like to read again the statement saying, none but those. So let's read again the statement. It says, 2 TG 42:41, 2 TG 42, page 41, those who keep God's solemn feast and perform their vows shall have this peace, none others shall. 2 TG 42, page 41, those who keep God's solemn feast and perform their vows shall have this peace, none others shall. 2 TG 42, page 41. So, that is the another signifying factor that you can discern that that is the 11th-hour church because their message is Isaiah 52:1 and Nahum 1:15. If that is the message of the 11th-hour servants, then the 11th-hour church observe the solemn feast. The 11th-hour church keep the solemn feast because it is illogical, brothers and sisters, that they will be commanded by God to tell Judah to keep the solemn feast, while in reality they themselves did not keep the solemn feast. We will continue the subject and hoping that the good Lord will bless us. Apology, because being human, we are liable to commit mistake. Forgive me if there's something that I said which is not appropriate, which is not good. But I'm only trying my best that if possible, not even one shepherd's rod believer will lose out. Thank you very much. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful